You're only good for paying bills. The words, sharp and cold, sliced through the thin morning air of our kitchen, hitting me with a force that stole my breath. They came from Liam, my own son, a boy I'd poured every ounce of my being into raising. Every dream I'd deferred, every sacrifice I'd made, I'd key. He stood there, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, a sneer twisting his young face into a mask I barely recognized. The fluorescent light hummed above us, casting a harsh, sterile glow that made the scene feel less like a family argument and more like a clinical dissection of my very soul. I could still smell the faint, lingering scent of burnt toast from breakfast, a mundane detail in a moment that felt anything but. I'd just finished explaining, for what felt like the 1,000th time, why I couldn't buy him the latest gaming console. Money was tight, always had been, for me. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to keep a roof over our heads, food on the table, and to give Liam even a fraction of what his friends seemed to effortlessly possess. I'd sacrificed dreams, hobbies, even relationships, all for him, and that was his gratitude. You're only good for paying bills. It wasn't just an insult, it was an act of profound erasure. It stripped away every late night spent worrying, every early morning commute, every silent prayer for his future, every tear shed in private. It reduced me to a mere financial transaction, a walking ATM, devoid of emotion, of personhood. A cold, heavy knot formed in my stomach, a familiar ache that had been growing over the years as Liam grew more distant, more entitled, more absorbed in his digital world. He used to be such a sweet boy, full of laughter and boundless wonder, his eyes bright with curiosity. When did that change? When did the world, or perhaps my own perceived failures, turn him into this stranger, this entitled young man who saw me only as a means to an end? I stood there, speechless, the cruel words echoing in the hollow space where my pride used to reside. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake him until he understood the crushing weight of his words, the years of effort they so casually dismissed. But I just stood there, a ghost in my own home, my voice trapped somewhere deep in my throat. He waited for a reaction, probably expecting an argument, a lecture, a plea. When none came, he just scoffed, a sound filled with contempt, turned on his heel and stomped off to his room, the door slamming shut with a finality that seemed to seal not just the argument, but something far more significant. That night, sleep was a cruel stranger. The phrase, "you're only good for paying bills," replayed in my mind, a broken record scratching at the raw edges of my soul. I stared at the ceiling, the shadows dancing like malevolent specters, each one a distorted reminder of a sacrifice, a missed opportunity, a silent tear shed in the darkness. I thought about all the times I'd gone without so he could have, the worn-out shoes, the skipped meals, the deferred dreams of a life I might have lived. Was this truly what it all amounted to? Just a bill-paying machine, a disposable utility? The thought was a slow-acting poison, seeping into every corner of my being, chilling me to the bone. I felt a strange, unsettling emptiness, a void opening up inside me. Not just sadness, but something deeper, something almost supernatural. A chilling sense that the very fabric of our connection, the invisible threads of love and sacrifice, had been severed, not by my hand, but by his careless, cutting words. It felt like a part of me had vanished, leaving an echo of what was. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet, too quiet. Liam usually burst out of his room, a whirlwind of teenage energy, demanding breakfast, complaining about school, his phone already glued to his hand. But today, nothing. A profound silence hung in the air, heavier than usual. I walked to his door, my heart pounding a strange rhythm against my ribs, a premonition of something unsettling. I knocked gently. No answer. I pushed it open. His room was neat, unusually so, almost sterile. His bed was made, his clothes folded, a stark contrast to the usual teenage chaos. But something was profoundly off, terribly, horribly off. My eyes scanned the room, searching for the anomaly, the missing piece. And then I saw it. Or rather, I didn't see it. His phone, his precious, always in hand, never out of sight phone. It wasn't on his nightstand, wasn't on his desk, wasn't under his pillow. It was gone, and not just gone from the room. It was gone from his life, as if it had never existed. He emerged moments later, rubbing sleep from his eyes, a yawn stretching his mouth, oblivious. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, heading straight for the kitchen, his hand instinctively reaching for his pocket, then his belt, then patting his sides. He didn't notice yet. He wouldn't, not until he reached for it. that digital extension of his very being, the device that had become his entire world. I watched him, a strange mix of dread and morbid curiosity churning in my gut. What else had his words taken? What else had vanished in the night? A silent, unseen consequence of a son's cruel dismissal. The air felt heavy, charged with an unspoken truth, a chilling premonition. This wasn't just about a phone. This was about something far, far bigger. And I, his mother, felt a strange, unsettling sense of responsibility, as if my own broken heart had somehow willed this emptiness into existence. The moment Liam realized his phone was gone was like watching a slow-motion car crash, a disaster unfolding with agonizing clarity. He'd poured his cereal, grabbed the milk, and then his hand went to his pocket. Nothing. His brow furrowed, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. He checked his other pocket, then his belt. His eyes darted around the kitchen, a nascent irritation beginning to bubble. "Mom, have you seen my phone?" he asked, his voice still thick with sleep, but the edge of demand already present. I just shook my head, my gaze fixed on him, observing, a strange detachment settling over me. He went back to his room, a quick perfunctory search, then returned, his movements becoming more frantic, his breathing shallow. "Seriously, Mom, this isn't funny. Where is it? I need it." "I haven't touched your phone, Liam," I said, my voice calm, almost unnaturally so, devoid of the usual exasperation. He started tearing his room apart, a whirlwind of teenage frustration, tossing clothes, pulling out drawers, his panic escalating into a full-blown, desperate frenzy. "It has to be here. I had it last night. I was just using it. I can't find it anywhere." He was sweating now, his face flushed, his eyes wide with a fear I hadn't seen in him since he was a small child. He checked under his bed, behind his desk, even in the laundry basket, his hands shaking. Nothing. The panic turned to desperation, then to a raw, primal fear that twisted his features. "It's gone! It's really gone!" he wailed, his voice cracking, tears welling in his eyes. He looked at me, his gaze wide, accusing, a desperate plea mixed with suspicion. "Did you hide it? Is this your way of punishing me for what I said?" I met his gaze, unwavering, my own heart a cold stone in my chest. "Punishing you for what, Liam?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning, a silent accusation that mirrored his own. He flinched, a flicker of recognition, a fleeting moment of guilt in his eyes, but he quickly dismissed it, his anger overriding any nascent self-reflection. "This is ridiculous. I need my phone. All my friends are on it, my games, my life is on it. You don't understand." He paced the kitchen, a caged animal, running his hands through his hair, pulling at the roots. He tried to use the landline. We still had one, a relic from a bygone era, to call his own number, but it just rang and rang. No voicemail, no indication it was even connected to a network. It was as if the number itself, his digital identity, had ceased to exist, wiped from the very fabric of the internet. Over the next few hours, the true horror began to unfold, slowly, inexorably. It wasn't just his phone, it was everything connected to it, everything that had formed the scaffolding of his online existence. His social media accounts, gone, his gaming profiles, erased, his entire digital footprint, the very essence of his online persona, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only error messages and blank pages. He tried to log into his email from my old clunky laptop, but his password wouldn't work. He tried to reset it, but the recovery email and phone number were linked to accounts that no longer existed. It was as if he had been digitally wiped from the face of the earth, a ghost in the machine. His friends started calling my phone, their voices laced with confusion and concern, asking where Liam was, why he wasn't responding, why his profiles had disappeared from their feeds. I could only offer vague, unconvincing excuses, my voice trembling, a chilling premonition settling deep within me. Liam was a wreck, a shadow of his former self. He sat on the couch staring blankly at the TV, which he usually ignored in favor of his phone, his thumb twitching as if still scrolling. He tried to watch a show, but his attention span, honed by endless rapid-fire scrolling and instant gratification, was non-existent. He kept reaching for his pocket, a phantom limb twitching, searching for the familiar weight that wasn't there. He tried to talk to me, but his conversations were always punctuated by a quick check of his phone, a glance at a notification, a need for external validation. Now there was nothing. He was adrift, unmoored from the digital world that had defined his existence, his identity. He looked lost, truly lost, like a sailor whose compass had vanished in the middle of a vast, empty ocean. with no stars to guide him. The silence in the house became oppressive, a heavy blanket smothering us both. Without the constant pings, the tinny music, the disembodied voices from video calls, the house felt hollow, echoing with the absence of his digital life. I watched him, my heart a complex mix of pity and a strange, unsettling satisfaction. He was experiencing for the first time what it felt like to be invisible, to have his existence reduced to nothing, to be utterly disconnected. Was this what I had felt yesterday when his words had stripped me bare? Was this the universe's cruel, poetic justice, or something far more sinister? I didn't know. All I knew was that something profound had shifted. A balance had been irrevocably altered. He tried to go out, to meet his friends, but he didn't know their numbers by heart, couldn't text them, couldn't find them. He relied on his phone for everything. Directions, meeting points, even just knowing who was available. He came back frustrated, defeated, his shoulders slumped. No one was around, he mumbled, collapsing onto the couch, his eyes vacant. He didn't realize that his friends, unable to reach him, had simply moved on with their plans, their lives continuing without him. He was isolated, cut off, a pariah in his own social circle. The digital umbilical cord had been severed and he was struggling to breathe in the real world, gasping for connection. I started noticing other things, small things at first, then larger, more significant ones. His favorite band's poster on his wall, a vibrant splash of color, seemed to fade slightly each day, the colors duller, the edges blurring. A trophy from a school sports day, which he'd always proudly displayed on his desk, now looked tarnished, almost forgotten, as if its significance had been leached away. It was as if the things he valued, the things that gave him identity, that he took for granted, were slowly losing their vibrancy, their very essence becoming mere shadows of their former selves. I tried to rationalize it, poor lighting, dust, my own overactive imagination, a trick of the light, but the feeling persisted, a cold dread creeping up my spine, a certainty that this was no coincidence. One evening, he came home from school, his face pale, his eyes wide with a new kind of terror. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible, trembling. "My favorite hoodie, the one I wore yesterday, it's gone. I swear I put it in my locker, but it's not there, and no one saw it. No one remembers me wearing it." I looked at him, my heart sinking, a chilling realization dawning on me. It wasn't just digital things anymore. It was physical. The hoodie was a small thing, but it was his. It was a part of his identity, a comfort item, a symbol of his style, and it was gone. Just like that, the pattern was emerging, chillingly clear, undeniable. What he valued, what he took for granted, what he used to define himself, was slowly, systematically, vanishing from his life and from the collective memory of those around him. And I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all connected to those words he'd uttered, the words that had reduced me to nothing. The universe, it seemed, had a very literal sense of humor, or perhaps a very dark, unforgiving sense of justice, and I was merely a witness to its unfolding. The disappearances escalated with a terrifying, relentless rhythm, each one a fresh, gaping wound on Liam's rapidly shrinking world. First, his phone and his entire digital existence. Then his favorite hoodie, a comfort item he'd practically lived in. Next, it was his meticulously curated collection of rare sneakers, the ones he'd saved for months, working odd jobs just to acquire. He'd woken up one morning, and they simply weren't in his closet. Not stolen, not misplaced, just gone. And when he mentioned it to his friends, their faces remained blank, devoid of recognition. "What sneakers, man? You only ever wear those beat-up old ones, remember?" It was as if his possessions were being systematically erased from reality, and more chillingly, from the collective memories of those around him. The gaslighting was subtle, insidious, and utterly terrifying. A slow erosion of his sanity. Liam became a ghost in his own life, a phantom haunting the halls of his existence. He stopped going to school altogether, claiming he was sick, but I knew the truth. He couldn't face the blank stares, the polite confusion from his peers who no longer remembered the things that defined him, the inside jokes, the shared experiences that had once bound them. His grades plummeted, a cascade of Fs. His teachers called, concerned, their voices laced with worry. But when I tried to explain even vaguely about the vanishing items, about the fading memories, they suggested stress, anxiety, perhaps even a need for intensive therapy. They didn't believe me, of course. How could they? It sounded utterly insane, a delusion, and perhaps it was. But it was our insane, a shared nightmare that only we seemed to inhabit. I watched him wither, a slow, agonizing process. The vibrant, arrogant teenager, full of life and digital bravado, was replaced by a hollow-eyed, trembling boy, his skin pale, his movements hesitant. He spent his days holed up in his room, staring at walls that seemed to close in on him, trapping him in a shrinking cage of reality. He tried to draw, a hobby he'd once loved, a source of immense joy, but his sketchbooks were now filled with distorted, empty figures, faces without features, landscapes without landmarks, as if his very ability to perceive and create was being drained away. He'd pick up a guitar, strum a few discordant chords, then drop it frustrated, as if the music itself had lost its meaning, its melody silenced. My own feelings were a tangled, agonizing mess. There was the initial, fleeting, grim satisfaction, a perverse sense of justice. He'd reduced me to a utility, a mere bill-paying machine, and now he was experiencing what it felt like to be reduced to nothing, to be erased. But that quickly gave way to a gnawing, suffocating fear. This wasn't just a lesson, this was an unraveling, a complete disintegration. I was his mother, and I was watching my son disappear piece by agonizing piece, his very essence being stripped away. Guilt gnawed at me, a relentless parasite. Had my silent, broken heart, my unvoiced pain, somehow triggered this terrifying manifestation? Had my despair somehow willed this emptiness into existence? I found myself whispering apologies to him in the dead of night, even though he couldn't hear me, couldn't possibly understand the depths of my torment. One afternoon he came downstairs, his eyes wide with a new, profound kind of horror, his face ashen. "Mom," he choked out, his voice a raw, desperate whisper, barely audible. "My childhood photos. The album. It's gone. The one with me and Dad at the beach. The one with my first birthday. All of them, my entire childhood." My blood ran cold, a glacial river through my veins. The photo album was a tangible link to his past, to his earliest memories, to the father he barely remembered, a man who had left us too soon. I rushed to the shelf where it always sat, a familiar fixture in our living room. Empty. Not a speck of dust, not a faint outline. It was as if it had never been there. And when I tried to recall specific details from those photos, a strange, thick fog descended on my mind. I knew they existed, intellectually, but the vividness, the emotional connection, the sharp edges of those memories were fading even for me, becoming blurred, indistinct. Liam started to forget things, not just objects, but concepts, experiences, simple things at first. What he had for breakfast that morning, the name of his favorite teacher from last year, then more significant things, the plot of his favorite movie, the one he'd watched 100 times, the lyrics to songs he'd known by heart since he was a toddler. He'd stare at me, his eyes pleading, lost. "Mom, what was that thing we used to do every summer? The one with the ice cream and the fireworks?" And I'd tell him, my voice thick with emotion, my own memories clinging precariously, but his eyes would remain blank, vacant, as if the words held no meaning for him, as if I was speaking a foreign language. His memories, the very foundation of his identity, his sense of self, were eroding, dissolving into nothingness. He became increasingly paranoid, a prisoner in his own mind. He'd check under his bed repeatedly, open his closet doors every few minutes, convinced that something else would vanish, that the invisible thief was always lurking. He started writing things down, frantically, in a desperate, futile attempt to hold on to reality, to anchor himself. His name, his address, the names of his friends, his favorite color, his birth date. But even those notes seemed to blur, the ink fading, the paper yellowing prematurely, as if the very act of writing them down was accelerating their demise. He was fighting a losing battle against an invisible, malevolent force that was systematically stripping him of everything that made him him, leaving only an empty shell. I tried to get him professional help, but it was impossible to explain. The doctors looked at me with pity, at Liam with concern, prescribing medication for anxiety and depression, suggesting family counseling. They saw a troubled teenager, a boy suffering from a mental breakdown, not a boy whose life was being erased by an unseen hand. And Liam himself couldn't articulate what was happening. He just knew things were disappearing, and no one believed him, not truly. He was trapped in a nightmare, and I was trapped with him, a silent observer, a helpless accomplice, watching my son fade away. The house itself began to feel different too, colder, emptier. The air was thick with unspoken dread, a palpable sense of loss. Objects that had been constants in our lives for years seemed to lose their presence, their solidity. A vase on the mantelpiece, a family heirloom passed down through generations, seemed to shimmer at the edges, almost transparent, as if it might vanish at any moment. I found myself touching things, running my fingers over surfaces, just to confirm they were still there, still real, still tangible. Still, the line between reality and illusion was blurring, not just for Liam but for me too, threatening to consume us both. And I knew, with a chilling, absolute certainty, that this was far from over. The universe wasn't just taking things, it was taking him. And I was terrified of what would be left when it was done, of the void that would remain. The morning it happened, I woke with a violent jolt, a cold sweat clinging to my skin, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. A dream, or perhaps a terrifying premonition, had shaken me to my core. Liam wasn't in his room. My voice, a raw, desperate whisper, cracked with each frantic call of his name as I searched the house. Every corner, every shadow. He wasn't there. But it wasn't just his physical absence that sent a glacial shiver down my spine. It was the profound, absolute silence that filled the house. A silence so heavy it pressed in on my eardrums. No lingering scent of his cologne, no faint echo of his footsteps, no impression on his bed, no discarded clothes. It was as if he had never existed within these walls. I ran to the living room, my eyes frantically scanning for any sign, any trace, any proof that he had ever been real. And then I saw it. Or rather, I didn't. The framed photo on the mantelpiece, the one of me and Liam when he was a baby, his tiny hand clutching my finger, his toothless grin melting my heart. It was gone. The space was empty, a faint, undisturbed dust outline, the only testament to its former presence. My breath hitched, a strangled gasp escaping my lips. I rushed to the family photo albums, pulling them from the shelf with trembling hands. Page after page, empty. His face, his presence, had been systematically erased from every single photograph. Not just his, but mine too, in relation to him. I was there, a solitary figure, but he wasn't. It was as if I had raised a ghost, a child who had never truly been, a figment of my own desperate imagination. Panic seized me, a cold, suffocating grip that stole the air from my lungs. I tried to remember his laugh, the unique cadence of his voice, the way he used to crinkle his nose when he was annoyed. A faint echo, distant, fading, like a whisper carried on a dying breeze. His face, his features, they were blurring in my mind, becoming indistinct, a watercolor painting dissolving in the rain. I closed my eyes, desperately trying to hold on to the vivid image of my son, to anchor him in my consciousness, but it was slipping through my fingers like fine sand, faster and faster with each desperate attempt. He was being erased, not just from the world, but from my own memory, from the very fabric of reality, from the tapestry of our shared history. I stumbled to the mirror, my reflection staring back at me, hollow-eyed and terrified, a stranger in my own skin. My own face seemed to shimmer at the edges, almost transparent, as if I too was becoming less real, less substantial. I touched my cheek, my hand trembling, a cold dread washing over me. Was I next? Was this the ultimate horrifying consequence of his cruel words, of my broken heart, of the silent wish for justice I had harbored? Was the universe punishing us both, erasing the very connection that had been so carelessly dismissed, so brutally devalued? Then a whisper, not in my ears but deep within the recesses of my mind, a chilling, undeniable realization that cut through the fog of my terror with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. You're only good for paying bills. The words, his words, echoed, clear as a bell in the sudden, profound emptiness that surrounded me. And then I understood. He had reduced me to a function, to a utility, to something disposable, something with no intrinsic value beyond its material contribution. And now, the universe was doing the same to him, with a terrifying, poetic symmetry. It was stripping away everything that wasn't useful in his own self-perception, everything he had taken for granted, his identity, his memories, his connections, his very existence. All were being deemed non-essential by the cosmic ledger, just as he had deemed my love, my sacrifice, my very being. This wasn't a curse. It was a mirror, a terrifying, unforgiving reflection of his own callousness, his own transactional view of the world. He had valued only what I could provide materially, dismissing the intangible, the emotional, the spiritual, the very essence of motherhood, of human connection. And now, everything intangible about him was being stripped away. His personality, his memories, his relationships, his very being. He was becoming what he had accused me of being, a functional void, a placeholder, an empty vessel. I sank to the floor, my knees giving way, tears streaming down my face, hot and relentless. Not just for Liam, but for the terrible, profound truth that had just been revealed. This wasn't something I could fight. This wasn't something I could reverse. It was a consequence, a natural law unfolding, a cosmic balance being restored with brutal efficiency. His words had created a vacuum, a void of appreciation, and the universe was filling it by taking away everything he didn't value in others, everything he took for granted in himself. The silence in the house was deafening, a monument to absence. It wasn't just the absence of Liam's physical presence, it was the absence of his memory. I tried to recall a specific argument, a specific joy, a specific moment with him, a shared laugh. The details were hazy, like a dream fading upon waking, dissolving into mist. I knew I had a son, intellectually, a fact etched into some distant part of my brain, but the emotional resonance, the vividness of our shared history was dissolving, becoming a faint echo. He was becoming a concept, not a person, a theoretical child I had once known. I looked around the empty house, a chilling, final realization settling over me, cold and heavy. He wasn't just gone. He was never here, not in the way that mattered, not in the way he had valued. He had lived a life focused on consumption, on what he could get, on what could serve him, not what he could be or give. And now the universe was taking back what he hadn't appreciated, what he had dismissed as irrelevant, the ultimate price for reducing human connection to a transaction. The climax wasn't a bang, but a terrifying silent erasure, and I, his mother, was left to witness the void, the chilling testament to a lesson learned too late, a lesson carved into the very fabric of my fading memories. The days that followed blurred into a surreal, quiet existence, a waking dream from which I couldn't escape. The house, once filled with the vibrant, chaotic echoes of a teenager's life, the slamming doors, the thumping music, the constant chatter, the digital pings, was now a tomb of profound, absolute silence. I walked through its rooms, a solitary figure, a keeper of a memory that was rapidly eroding even for me. I'd find myself pausing, my hand hovering over a spot where Liam used to sit or stand, and for a fleeting moment, a phantom limb of memory would twitch, a faint echo of his presence, a ghost of a feeling. But then it would vanish, leaving only the cold, hard reality of absence, a void that seemed to grow with each passing hour. I tried to talk about him to others, to my closest friends, to family members I'd known my entire life. My son, Liam, I'd start, my voice tentative, hopeful, and then their eyes would glaze over, a polite, confused smile on their faces, a subtle shift in their posture. Your son? Oh, I thought you never had children. My name. Or are you feeling all right? You've always been so independent, so focused on your career. It was as if his existence had been completely expunged from the collective consciousness, leaving only me, the sole unreliable witness to a life that had been, a life that had simply ceased to be for everyone else. The world had simply adjusted, seamlessly, to his non-existence, like water flowing around a stone that was no longer there. He was gone, and no one missed him, because no one remembered him. My own memories of him became increasingly fragmented, like old photographs left out in the sun, their colors fading, their details blurring into indistinct shapes. I knew I had loved him deeply, fiercely, with every fiber of my being. I knew I had sacrificed for him, given him everything I had, but the specific moments, the tender touches, the shared laughter, the heated arguments, the milestones, they were all dissolving into a hazy, indistinct past, becoming mere concepts rather than vivid experiences. It was a terrifying process, like watching a part of my own brain being slowly, meticulously scrubbed clean, leaving behind only a hollow ache. I was losing him not just from my life, but from my very self, from the core of my identity as a mother. Sometimes I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to text him, or instinctively preparing an extra plate at dinner, setting out his favorite mug. Old habits, ingrained over years of motherhood, dying a slow, painful death. Each time the realization would hit me anew, a fresh wave of grief for a loss that no one else acknowledged, a sorrow I had to carry alone. I was living in a personal purgatory, haunted by a ghost only I could perceive, a ghost that was itself fading, becoming less and less substantial. I stopped working the extra jobs. There was no one to pay bills for anymore, No one to provide for, no future to secure. The purpose that had driven me for so long, the relentless pursuit of financial stability for his sake, had vanished with him. I spent my days in quiet contemplation, reading books I'd never had time for, tending to a small garden, finding a strange, melancholic peace in the mundane, in the quiet rhythm of a life stripped bare. The world outside continued, oblivious, its gears grinding forward. Life went on without Liam, without the memory of Liam, as if he had been nothing more than a fleeting shadow. The lesson, if it was one, was brutal in its simplicity, etched into the silence of my home. Value what is intangible. Value connection, love, presence, empathy, not just utility, not just what can be consumed or gained. For if you reduce everything to a transaction, to what it can do for you, then when that utility is gone, so too is the essence, the very soul of existence. Liam had learned it too late, and I was left to bear witness to its chilling, unforgiving truth. I often wonder if, somewhere, in some forgotten corner of the universe, a fragment of Liam still exists, a faint echo, a fleeting shadow, a whisper on the cosmic wind, or if he truly became nothing, a void, a lesson in the ultimate terrifying cost of indifference and transactional living. I don't know. All I know is that the silence in my house is absolute, a constant hum of absence. And sometimes, late at night, when the moon casts long shadows across the empty living room, I hear a faint whisper, carried on the wind, a single chilling phrase, a final, haunting echo. You're only good for paying bills. And I wonder if it's his last fading memory, or just my own, forever etched into the silence, a permanent scar on my soul. The world moves on, but I remain, a silent monument to a son who vanished, and a mother who remembers for now, until the last memory finally dissolves.